Hey, what's up guys, this is DarkArmedDuelist, and today we're going to be doing a chain burn deck profile, aka Dragoons Go Burr, which is a really amazing deck. It has some really interesting text in here, and it's actually a deck profile request by Izzy. So thank you so much, Izzy, for actually requesting this one. This one was a blast to actually make, just to see how much I could like throw burn cards into this deck. With all the way that the burn cards have escalated over the years, is just absolutely amazing. From cards like Mikey on the Time Lord to using Red Eyes Dark Dragoons, it is just a crazy deck all around. So without further ado guys, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell there so you can come part of the notification squad, and definitely check out the Patreon down in the description below, just like Izzy did, and to get all those awesome rewards like getting your name searched in every single video, getting assigned cards in the mail, or even getting to your requested deck profile every single month to your patron along with test hands. And without further ado guys, let's get straight on into this, and definitely give Izzy some love down in the comments down below, because this is your daily monthly dose of Izzy. So we're going to open up with 3 copies of Mikey on the Time Lord. So Mikey on the Time Lord is a crazy card in this deck. It's the only Time Lord that you actually play, and what it does is it can't be normal summon or set, and if you control no monsters, you can normal summon this card without tributing. And it can't be destroyed by battle or by card effects, and you take no battle damage from battles involving this card. And at the end of the battle phase, if this card battled at all, your opponent halves their life points. Like, that is pretty good, just to half your opponent's life points. It can't be targeted by card effect, or it can't be destroyed by battle or by card effects, which is great. And then also, once per turn during your standby phase, you have to shuffle this card back into the deck. But even if you just normal summon this and set 5 and pass, then it's really good to just be able to do that and be able to wait your opponent out, because they're going to have a tough time just dealing with this card. We then play 3 of a really awesome card that I wanted to throw in here, which is 3 copies of Marshmallow. I know I didn't think I'd be putting this in a deck either, but hey, it works. And so what this card basically does for the deck is it's a monster that can't be destroyed by battle. And it also, if your opponent attacks into it and it's flipped face up, then they take 1,000 points of damage, which is insanely funny, because you set this and set 5 or 4 on your side of the field, depending on if you're going first or second, and then they attack into this and they're like, wait, Pikachu face? What just happened? And they hit a Marshmallow, and it's like, I can't get rid of that? Okay, cool. Chain all my back row and do whatever I need to do. We then play a single copy of Morphing Jar. Morphing Jar is really neat because it refreshes your hand, which is why I play this card in the deck. Morphing Jar is really fun to play in here because you can set this as well, and if you're going into game 2 and your opponent attacks into your face down, they're going to think, I'm going to hit the Marshmallow. But then they flip the Morphing Jar during your turn because they won't attack into the back row, which is something that's actually happened in playtesting with this deck. It was really interesting that I flipped this face up, I chained all my back row, and then activated Morphing Jar's effect to refill my hand to reset 5 more burn cards, which was great. So this card's really good to help you replenish your hand. And then we play 2 copies of Dark Magician and 2 copies of Red Eyes Black Dragon. These are basically here just to go into your copy of Dragoons to be able to summon out a monster that can essentially OTK your opponent on its own, which is really amazing. Plus, you can use these as normal summons. You can normal summon out the copy of your Mikey on, and then maybe later use your copy of Marshmallow to be able to contact them together to go in for an Anaconda if you need to, but usually you just hard draw into the Red Eyes Fusion and be able to go into it that way. So that's it for the monsters, guys. Let's get into the spells. So for the spells, we're going to be playing a single copy of Magical Eyes Fusion, because if you do use Red Eyes Fusion, you do have the ability to go in for a second Dragoons, and being able to use this card with that is really good. You play 3 copies of Red Eyes Fusion. Red Eyes Fusion is really good in this deck because Red Eyes Fusion, when it's activated, you can fusion summon into a copy of a Red Eyes Fusion monster by sending the materials from your deck to the graveyard. It also has the ability, or hand to the graveyard as well, or field, which is really nice. So basically from anywhere except for the graveyard, they can be used as fusion material or being banished, but it's really good because you can't normal summon the turn, which is not that big of a deal because Mikey on you can't have anything on the field when you summon him anyways, but it's really good because you can still set your Marshmallow or your copy of Morphing Jar to your side of the field, but you can't normal summon or special summon, but you can still set, which is really nice. We then play 3 copies of Wave Motion Cannon. Wave Motion Cannon is nice in the deck too because you use your copy of Dragoons actually strategically in this deck, because you want to protect your copy of Wave Motion Cannon on your side of the field, because your opponent might try and, I don't know, MST it or Harpy's Feather Duster your back row. So the copy of Red Eyes Dark Dragoons negate is actually really nice because usually people aren't playing that many like back row like destruction cards anymore, and so you play wave motion cannon and then they're like, oh, I can't deal with that. And if you double it up, it kind of works like flare metal, which is really nice to be able to go after your opponent for 1,000 for every standby phase that you have it on the field for your standby phases. So this card is really, really good in the deck. We then play 3 copies of Pot of Extravagance, because Pot of Extravagance is really good in the deck to be able to draw cards, because you really do not care about the extra deck outside of Dragoons, and basically you play a couple of tech cards in the extra deck that you might summon every so often, but this card is insanely good in the deck because you get to draw 2 at the beginning of your main phase 1, which is really good, but this has to be the first card that you activate, which is not that big of a deal, but it does get you a +1, which is what's really nice. We then play a single copy of Card Demise. Card Demise is really good because you're going to be setting all your cards anyways, so this card is great, and you're going to be doing everything during your opponent's turn, so playing a single copy of Card Demise is just really nice. And then we play a single copy of Chain Strike, because you can only play 1 copy of Chain Strike. I will mention, you guys, this can get really high in chain links, which is great because you activate this card as a chain link 2 or higher, and then you inflict 400 points of damage to your opponent for each chain link number in the chain. So for example, if I activate a copy of Secret Blast, Just Desserts, and Secret Barrel, if I activate all 3 of those and then Chain Strike, my opponent takes 400 for each card in the chain. So they would lose in a grand total of 1,600. But if they had any cards in the chain, it would go up to 2,000, 2,400 just on 1 copy of Chain Strike, which is really, really good. But you can't have cards with the same name in the same chain link, so I can't activate multiple copies of Just Desserts in the same chain. So that's very important to keep in mind when you're playing Chain Strike. So that's it for the spells, guys. Let's get into the traps. So for the traps, this is where the deck starts really popping off, because you play a lot of different traps in this deck. So the first off, we're going to be playing 3 copies of Secret Blast. Secret Blast is a really, really neat card because it has the ability that you inflict 300 points of damage to your opponent for each card they control, and if this card you control is destroyed by an opponent's card and sent to the graveyard, you inflict 1,000 points of damage to your opponent. So regardless, whatever they do, they're going to take a little bit of damage off this card. If they get rid of it, they're going to take 1,000. If they actually just activate this card, they're going to take at least 300 for each card that they control. We then play 3 copies of Just Desserts. Just Desserts is a super old card. These are actually standard deck Kaiba. All 3 of them are standard deck Kaiba. Just Desserts. But what this card does is inflicts 500 points of damage to your opponent, or actually what the card says is inflicts 500 points of direct damage to your opponent's life points for each monster your opponent has on the field. Which is really neat, because if you give them your Ojama Trio, you're going to instantly give them 1,500 points of damage, which is funny. Because they're like, oh, cool, I have a monster that I can link away. And then you do this, and it's like, oh, 1,500 for all 3. Great. We then play 3 copies of Secret Barrel. Secret Barrel is really good, too, because it inflicts damage to your opponent times 200 for every card in their hand and on their field. So if you activate this right off the bat, if you don't think your opponent's going to go plus anything, you can instantly inflict 1,200 points of damage to your opponent on their draw phase, which is really nice, because during standby phase, you can just activate it and immediately do 1,200, which is really nice. We then play 3 copies of Ceasefire. Ceasefire is really cool because if a face-down Defense Vision monster or an effect monster is on the field, you can change all face-down Defense Vision monsters on the field to face-up defense, and it doesn't activate their effects. And then you inflict 500 points of damage to your opponent for each effect monster on the field, which is really crazy. It's not quite as good as Just Desserts to me, because it just isn't with Ojama Trio. It just isn't quite as good to me because they're technically normal monsters, don't have effects, so it doesn't kind of work well with that. But it still does do a lot of damage against your opponent, because even if they have 3 monsters on the field, it's going to do 1,500 points of damage. So this card is really good in the deck. We then play 3 copies of Ojama Trio. Ojama Trio is really, really good because it special summons the 3 tokens to your opponent's side of the field as 200 attack, 0 attack, 1,000 defense to your opponent's side of the field and defense. They can't be tributed for a tribute summon, and each time 1 is destroyed, its controller takes 300 points of damage. You're usually not going to do the 300 points of damage to your opponent, but it's still really good to put this on the board because your copies of Just Desserts, they count as monsters that they control, so it does inflict the extra damage, which is really nice. We then play 3 copies of Magic Cylinder because Izzy actually requested for me to throw Magic Cylinders in this deck, and it's actually pretty good because usually the only way that your opponent is going to out a copy of Dragoons is to attack through it. And with playing Magic Cylinders, you're not going to have that problem because you're going to be able to Magic Cylinders the opponent's monster. And usually it's going to have to be at least 4,000 to attack through a copy of Dragoons, which has happened to me, which is really funny. So if you activate the copy of Magic Cylinders, I've had somebody Utopia double me and I've activated this against them and they're like, oh, Oof. Or summon out something that was like 5,000 attack and they literally OTK'd themselves. They played themselves, which is really funny. I love playing this card in this deck because it's really, really good. It does target, but it's just a really good card overall to play in here to protect your Dragoons. So that's it for the main deck, guys. Let's get into the extra deck. And I know this is a wild deck, but hey, it's Izzy. So for the extra deck, we're going to be playing, again, keep in mind, you don't really care about the extra deck outside of Dragoons, so it is subject to change how you feel like you need to. If you feel like you need to throw in Cerberus or IP Masquerena, you totally can. I'm not playing those, but it's kind of up to you as long as you play 3 Dragoons. But we're going to open up and we're going to play 3 copies of Dragoons. Dragoons is extremely important. You don't want to hit it with Extravagance. It doesn't happen very often that you actually do, because you do play a 15 card extra deck. And what this card does is it can be destroyed by card effects, and neither player can target this card with card effects. And then during your main phase, you can target, or you can destroy 1 monster opponent controls equal to the number of amount of normal monsters that you use to fusion summon this card, and then you inflict damage to your opponent equal to that monster's attack, which is why I called this deck Dragoons Go Burr, or Chain Burn. But what this card does basically as well is also, if your opponent activates any card's effect, then you can discard a card to negate the activation if you destroy that card. And then this card gains 1,000 attack. So, pretty good card. Actually, insanely busted card, but it's really good in this deck. And so I kind of based the deck around it. We then play 3 copies of Verte Anaconda. Anaconda is really good too, because the Anacondas help you get your copy of Dragoons out. You're rarely going to summon this card, but it does come up every so often that you can use it. We then play 2 copies of Phoenix as well. The Phoenix do pop back row, which is why I played the Phoenix at 2 in the deck. It's, again, rarely going to come up, but it's kind of utility just in case you need it. And you do have to play a 15 card extra deck with this build because you don't want to hit, anything with Extravagance that you don't want to hit. 2 copies of Blockade Board Blocker. Blockade Board Blocker is really good because this card can recur your copies of your Wave Motion Cannon, so it's pretty good. 2 copies of Alamirage. Now, Alamirage is a card that I actually summon from time to time in this extra deck, because you can normal summon, you can use any monster that's been normal summoned, so you can use Marshmallow, or you can use your copy of your Mykion the Time Lord. So it does come up every so often. You can throw more Time Lords into this deck as well, if you want to go for a copy of, to summon out your copy of the, what's its name? Gustav Max, which you can play Gustav Max in here if you do put more Time Lord in here, but I just kind of wanted to base it around Dragoons for now. If Dragoons gets hit on the next list, I probably will change it to be more of a Time Lord burn deck, but it does come up every so often that you will summon Alamirage. And then we play 3 copies of Flare Metal because, hey, sometimes you can actually put this card on top of the extra deck. You're never going to summon it, but it's here because you don't really have anything else you need in the extra deck. You really just play the copies of the Alamirage and the Blockade Borgs and the Dragoons. The rest of the stuff is kind of utility just in case you might need it. And Dragoons is kind of the same thing. You might have 2 level 7s in one weird circumstance on the field because you play Dark Magician and Red Eyes, and you might so happen to be able to overlay into Flare Metal, and plus this is one of the best burn cards in the entire game, so I figured why not. I thought it was kind of cool to throw it in the extra deck, especially with an Extravagance deck that you don't really care too much about the extra deck at all. You can change these out. I will mention, you guys, you can totally change these out if you want to for 3 copies of Cerberus, or 3 copies of Unicorn, or 2 copies of Unicorn and an IP Masquerena, or an Appaloosa. You can even climb into an Appaloosa if you want to, or another Alamirage and 2 copies of Cerberus so you can pop monsters. I didn't feel like I needed the Cerberuses because of the Dragoons anyways, but hey, it's an option there if you guys want to do that. So this is it for the deck profile. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, guys. Definitely tell me what you think in the comments down below of this deck, or maybe not, about this one. But thank you so much, Izzy, for requesting this one, because this deck is absolutely crazy. Because this deck is super weird and super, like, fun to play. Because I used to have a burn deck back a long time ago, when I first started playing Yu-Gi-Oh! And we had, like, Secret Barrels had just been released, and I actually built it. And it was fun. Like, I enjoyed playing it, but nobody enjoyed playing against me, which was kind of the point. But it's still fun, especially being able to summon Dragoons and put it in a burn deck. I don't know how much more, like, mean this deck could be, but hey, it works. And it's exactly what Izzy wanted. So anyways, guys, this is DarkArmedDuelist. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell there so you can become part of the notification squad, and we'll see you guys in the next video. See you later, guys, and thank you, Izzy.